I might just do a quick introduction to Daisy Wong and Melissa Misuraca. For those that don't know Daisy or Melissa, Daisy is now working at the Department of Premier and Cabinet in Victoria, and Melissa is a freelancer. This will be a really great segue, I think, to what Jeff was just talking about. Jeff was obviously talking about automation, to be able to use automation to scale the program. Similarly, Daisy and Melissa are really going to talk about how you might engage others across the business to help amplify and scale your program too. So I think it's a really nice segue from a topic that we've just covered. So I'll hand to them to introduce and get going. Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Daisy.
Thanks, Blair, and thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm Melissa Misuraca. I'm located in Melbourne, Australia, for anyone that's joining from outside of Australia. A little bit about our presentation. We'll be talking about leading the development of security awareness programs and engaging multidisciplinary teams across different areas of your organisation. As Blair previously mentioned, I am a security awareness freelancer, and I've developed about 40 or so programs in the last sort of 6 years. So as I mentioned, been working in this field for quite a number of years, and the reason why we chose this topic was we wanted to really talk about the way you might be able to engage your security awareness champions after you have engaged them and recruited for them. So this presentation does assume a certain level of maturity. It assumes that you've already done that recruitment piece, you've got some great people engaged and on side to help you scale and develop your program and lead it across the organisation. But what are some of the tricks and tips that we've learned along the way to actually get the best out of those champions and making sure that your security awareness program really hits the mark? A little bit of a tip, our presentation does involve meerkats. So if you're wondering why Daisy's sitting there holding a meerkat on her lap, there is some relevance to our presentation, and really I'll just give you a quick tip that is really around meerkats being creatures that are risk aware, and we've learned a lot from how security champions work, and we can also learn a lot about how meerkats work in the wild, and those two things have come together for this presentation. So I'll now hand it over to Daisy to talk a little bit more about that.
Hi everyone, thanks Mel. I'm Daisy Wong. I'm the Cyber Culture and Engagement Lead at the Department of Premier and Cabinet. And like Mel said, we're here to talk to you about cybersecurity awareness, but also meerkats. So if this, there we go. But before we go into meerkats, just wanted to tell you the problem we were trying to solve and a bit of the landscape. So I work at the Victorian government. It's a state government down in Australia. To call it a large and complex organisation is an understatement. There's 9 departments, 1,800 entities, and we employ over 300,000 people. So these are the people I'm trying to train, but my issue is I have no mandate. So I need to rely on influencing, and my role is just an advisory one. So I really need to influence our security champions and to work with them to make them our meerkats, and they become our arms and legs into the department and use our material. It's also really important that when we created the material and our strategy, that it was within budget and it was able to satisfy the whole Victorian government, the whole organisation. So that's that. Now, what about meerkats? There are going to be a lot of meerkats across throughout this whole presentation. If you haven't met them before, I have. I had one in my lap, as you could see before, because I had an encounter where I fed them. They're cute little creatures with very sharp claws, so beware, be warned, but they are very cute. These little furry creatures are from the Kalahari Desert, and we can actually learn a lot from them. So these little creatures live in inhospitable, dry and scorching environments. They're quite defenseless, I think, of our staff. Sometimes with all the cyber threats around us, they can also be defenseless. Meerkats need to dig numerous times a day for small amounts of food. And the only way for them to survive is to be able to work as a team and to communicate really well. And these meerkats then form, what they call mobs. And that is how they've been able to teach us, and we've been able to do the same in Victorian government, and that is to identify our meerkats and form our mobs, and that's how we're able to work together to uplift cybersecurity knowledge. Now I'm going to pass back to you, Mel. You can tell us how we meerkat.
Thanks, Daisy. So as Daisy mentioned, meerkats are risk-aware creatures. So they're always on the lookout for predators when they're hunting, and they really work together in teams, especially when they're hunting and when they're gathering as a group. So what does that mean from a security awareness perspective or engaging your change champions? It really means about engaging champions to really collaborate, work together to call out risks, make improvements and suggestions. IT security's eyes cannot be everywhere. Same with the meerkats, that's why they work so well in the mob. So the more risk awareness that your champions have, understanding of risk, so bringing them in early in that discovery phase when you're sitting down and planning your program, to get them to understand risk. What are the types of things that you're looking for? What are the types of risks that concern the organisation? And that way they've got a better understanding of, what the program's objectives are and what is really going to be those long-term behavioural changes that need to be made. In our case, we ran workshops with cyber risk managers, insurance specialists, HR, IT, and the cybersecurity incidents team. And we really wanted to understand not only what happened, but why it happened. So for example, if someone clicked on a phishing link or if there was a secure code vulnerability, we went really down into that next level of detail to understand the why. And that really did help inform some more targeted training. So we weren't just talking about problems, we were talking about how they occurred and what the long-term solutions were. In terms of engaging with your security champions, you might be able to go back to those areas and making sure that you have actually uncovered everything that's going on in the organisation. So yes, you might have your cybersecurity incidents register, but is there anything else that's happening, perhaps with remote teams or offsite teams or customer-facing teams, things that, you might not be aware of. And you'll be surprised, you'll actually then start to uncover some things that, maybe IT security doesn't have visibility of, because as I said, their eyes can't be everywhere. The other aspect of engaging your champions early in that discovery or planning stage is that you get an understanding of what the best channels are that are going to work with those different audiences. So as Daisy mentioned, we were working across multiple teams across an organisation of many thousands of people. And all of those different departments have different mandates. So, there's fire, there's water, there's Department of Treasury, there's a whole bunch of different functions. So trying to understand all of those functions and audiences is really difficult. By asking the champions early on, what are the best channels? What are the best training examples that you can give us? What are the best ways to communicate? You then, you're able to then tailor that message a lot better early on in the game. They can also give you advice on, for example, what are the best times of the year? Are there any times that aren't going to work for certain departments, or their focus is going to be elsewhere? And that really does make you get a more accurate picture of the risks, and again, will make your programs a lot more targeted and relevant in the long run. So how to meerkat, what do you expect to get after that discovery piece with your champions once they've been recruited? This is really simple discovery plan on a page. So the font is a little bit small, so I'll read it out to you. Your short-term goals, medium and long-term goals. So you should be able to have a list, a laundry list if you like, of short-term, medium and long-term things that you want to improve. A short-term goal might be, for example, there's lots of people within the organisation that are leaving their laptops open when they walk away from their desk. So, a short-term kind of fun way to raise visibility might be desktop stickers to stick on their computer while they're away, just giving them sort of that hint that they've left their computer open and they really need to sort of, be vigilant about that. A medium type objective could be password manager uptake as an example. So it's going to take a little bit more time, a little bit more targeted comms. You're going to have to empower those champions then to go back out to their respective departments to engage with their teams about the importance of password manager. And that might take a little bit more, it's going to take a longer time to get that uptake. It's not going to be an overnight success. Your long-term goal could be something like looking at year on year your rates of incidents. So are the incidents in those different departments going down? And is your increase in training and participation in events going up? And maybe have you even recruited some more champions from those groups? That could be a good indicator as well. So how to meerkat in terms of communication? So meerkats really do depend on communications for their survival. So they call out constantly to each other in their little mobs. There's about 30 different calls that they talk to each other on, and that's really how they are able to survive in such harsh conditions. So what does that mean for security awareness professionals that are developing champions programs? It really means that you want to encourage that two-way comms early on. So I think sometimes security awareness professionals can be guilty of just releasing communications out and not taking back that two-way street or that two-way engagement. So I think it's really important to engage early on. You can even socialise your program early on with your group of champions and sort of ask for their feedback before you start implementing it. So I think that's really a good idea. Make them part of that content review and refinement process. And when it comes to actually developing materials, getting your champions involved as a pilot group where they can review material, make suggestions and revert back is a really good thing. And the reason why it's a good thing is that they'll pick up on things that you might miss or you might not be aware of. They'll ask a lot of the questions that can be answered, and therefore the comms and training can be tailored before you go to that big release. So it does mean, if you're launching something like a password manager or a report fish tool, you flesh out or you thrash out all of those questions early on before you then go out to thousands of people across the organisation. And who doesn't love a lower number of launch inquiries? So there's nothing worse than launching something and you get all these questions back because the comms wasn't clear or the training wasn't clear. You get to shake that out early on with your champions. So I'd really encourage you to engage them early and get them on side, if you like, supportive and being able to be part of that review process. They can then, once you've refined that content, give them that content to take back to their teams and promote it to their mobs to encourage secure behaviour. One of the ways that we've done that with the Victorian government is that we have looked at content and materials that are really scalable and repeatable. So, for example, we've created like digital toolkits. So, you're arming your champions with your key messages and the content. They're going out to their mobs, but, how are you going to make that digitally available so that it's ongoing, it's repeatable, it's scalable if the group grows. So, you can't have dedicated security awareness professionals in each of the departments, but perhaps you can empower them with digital content that's constantly updated, drawing them to that one source of truth. And so as the organisation grows, as new departments, their teams grow, there's new champions, you're just pointing them all to that one source of truth that's constantly updated. So training and mentoring, how to meerkat. So meerkats really understand the importance of growing and training in their mobs. Adult meerkats will mentor their young, and those young then go out to raise risks for the mob. So they sort of go out in their little groups and they can then meerkat to each other and call out to each other and raise risks. The adults also give their young on-the-job training as apprentice hunters. Now, luckily, we're not having to hunt and dig for our food. I'm told that the meerkat has to spend hours just to get little worms and bugs. So luckily, we don't have to do that. We're not working that hard when it comes to security awareness for our survival. But we can definitely take on board some of those attributes of a meerkat when it comes to training and mentoring. And so what do I mean by that is that IT, again, can't be everywhere. So whether or not you can then do a train the trainer session with some of your change champions. So we're going to look out for champions that are really, they're really excited about cybersecurity. They maybe even want to have a career in security down the track. There could be people at things like hack days or IT town halls or events and things of that sort of nature. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to do a lot of face-to-face because of COVID, but if we are able to go back to where there's that more on-site or face-to-face engagement, it's much easier to have those kind of conversations about, being involved in your security awareness champion program. And another aspect is to also encourage staff that have an interest in cybersecurity as a career path. So we all know that there's a skill shortage in some areas of security. So one of the ways to get really motivated security champions might be, getting them involved in UAT testing of a new tool or a new system, getting them involved in secure code hackathons, for example. So that they're the sorts of ways that you can really encourage people that will have a long-term invested view of security awareness. Pushing for the growth, training and development of the highest risk audiences. So encouraging your champions to locate in their teams some of those high risk groups and encourage them to have the conversation about training. You know, if for example, you're running dedicated executive awareness sessions or, dedicated sessions for VIPs or execs, you know, asking them to encourage sign up of your training within their team meetings or within their, you know, lunch and learns and things like that. So it's much easier to start getting traction and getting that buy-in and that support if there's more arms and legs, you know, trying to get those enrollments up for things like training. And, you know, ideally, you could even have some change champions that are comfortable with running their own training eventually. So, you know, they might be comfortable with running security awareness updates at team meetings, or they might be able to give an update on cybersecurity awareness month or privacy awareness month. So again, it's all about empowering people, making them comfortable with those key messages, and then scalability of that program ongoing. So how to meerkat, what does success look like? I've put on this page here it's a training comms plan on a page. So I haven't gone into a lot of detail about how to pull one together. You can simply Google training comms plan on a page and grab a template. There's heaps available. The reason why we chose for the department for this particular case study is that it was too difficult to have one training plan on a page for such a vast number of audiences. So, you know, we've got so many different departments, so many different user communities, so many different risks in different areas. We can't just have a one-size-fits-all model. So each of the champions will have a dedicated training and comms plan on a page for their respective areas. And that will include things like, you know, the key metrics, the key objectives, key messages, you know, key training activities. So the meerkats or the change champions can then help implement, support and measure those activities within their areas. And I think it's really good because we do need to keep our champions engaged and making sure that they feel like they're making a difference. And I think having that plan on a page where they can track and measure what they're doing and what they're supporting is a really good thing. I've also included the SANS security awareness metrics slide in here as well. So a lot of you will be familiar with this. If you're not, you can just jump on the SANS website and type in metrics framework. But again, we weren't able to have a metrics framework, one size fits all for all of the Victorian government. It's just too big. So each of the champions will be able to then take their security awareness metrics, which that bell curve, and look at the individual activities that are going on in their department, and then measure and track accordingly. So we'll be asking all of those champions to come back to our monthly meeting and give us a bit of an update on where they're at or where the department's at in implementing some of those activities. And that way we can get a much better granular view of where the different departments, where their focus is and where they might need some support. And I think it's also fair to say that we're tracking and measuring the program at a more granular level, and really being able to focus on improving things that need to be supported. That's all for me. I'll hand now back to Daisy to talk a bit more about our journey and success to date.
Thanks, Mel. Yes, thanks to Mel for explaining. I think we've done pretty well in meerkatting our staff. So to date, we're still kind of in the process of it, but like I said at the start, we have no mandate. It is 300,000, but by meerkatting, identifying our champions and bringing them in early, and like Mel said, bring them in early, identify their risks and really communicate and engage with them, we've been able to mandate some of the training we've created. So for instance, the e-learn modules, we've been able to mandate that for some departments with over 5,000 staff. So that's been really good. And we've also created what I call the cyber culture working group. So that's my mob of meerkats. There's about 20 of them. So it's really good that we're able to identify our meerkats, our arms and legs, and they're then able from my mob to go back to their organizations and their mobs and to be able to use and share our content. Obviously, I don't have the budget to create a training material for everyone, but if we can use the same material, customize it, and it's scalable, we're going to eventually reduce duplication of efforts and costs. So far, thanks to you, Mel, I think we're doing our journeys quite well. I'm really excited to continue growing our mob throughout the whole of Victorian government. So just a bit of a wrap up and some takeaways for everyone. And that is, it's really important to engage with your meerkats early in the planning phase, especially if you're in a large complex organization like myself. I have so many organizations, the maturity level is different. So you really want to engage with them early, so then you can actually understand the local risks and the different communication channels that they use. Each organization is different. Some organizations use Slack like SANS, some use Yammer, some don't use any, they rely mainly on emails or the intranet. So it's really important that the content you create can be used across all the channels. It's also important that the content that we create shows relevance. So it's not just, we think, you know, this is what you need. We've actually gone and consulted. We've looked at the data. We've consulted with our meerkats. They're involved from the planning phase, and the material that we create is relevant to them. So for instance, like last year, we had, you know, with the pandemic, most staff were working remotely. So we created more specific content about remote working. This shows trust, that you trust that your meerkats are bringing you the risks, and they trust you that you've absorbed that those risks and you've created content accordingly. So I think it's really important that it's not just two-way communication, but two-way trust as well. And I think we've repeated throughout this presentation, but it's really important that the plan is scalable and sustainable. So you don't want a plan that, or material that you can only use for 1 year. You want to be able to build on top of that and really make that sustainable. Last but not least, cherish and be kind to your meerkats. I think that's really important. They are going to be the ones consuming the content, delivering the messages. They're going to help you recruit more meerkats, to build your mobs, and to bring new risks that you might not have considered in the past. So, you know, the security champions meerkats are going to be the ones to do that. And yeah, so remember to nourish your mobs. Have I missed anything, Mel? Do you have anything else to add about our meerkats and mobs?
No, I think you've covered it all. I think we'll be able to take any questions now, if there's any questions that anyone has live, or we can also be available in the Slack channels to have a chat. Just a final note that you can add us on LinkedIn. So Daisy Wong, Melbourne, Australia, and Melissa Misuraca, Melbourne, Australia as well.
Brilliant. Thanks both. We'll give it a few minutes for people to drop in any questions into the Slack, and as they come through, if I see any drop into the Q&A, I'll get to those. But I actually wanted to lead with a question, if I can, is obviously at Telstra, we're a pretty large organisation and very disparate and diverse, nowhere near to the extent that obviously the challenge that you're dealing with at DPC. But one of the things that we've found really incredibly valuable is a champions program, or we call ours an evangelist program. One of the challenges we haven't really probably worked out how to solve, and I'd be interested to hear your perspective, is there's a lot of value for us once we actually recruit those evangelists into the program, or champions into the program. What we've sort of struggled with is some of the areas of the organisation are just really hard to even get people in the first place. So, and mainly because, and I think, you know, you'll have a similar challenge where you've got a lot of people that are working in areas like in Telstra, it might be in retail or in field services, or folks that don't necessarily come to work in the morning and log on to a laptop. You'll have probably similar organisations like the Fireys or in education or whoever it might be. Interested to know if you had anything, or have you got an approach that might work or has been a bit more successful in terms of even how you even lead the outreach into those areas to recruit people into those champions networks?
Yeah.
Mel, do you want me to go first, or you go first?
I might just touch on, just because you mentioned retail, so haven't achieved that with DPC in terms of retail, but I will just quickly mention that in the past I have worked where there's been retail groups or retail departments, and this was before COVID, so you're able to actually go out and visit them. And what I did was speak to the account managers and the area managers of those retail outlets, try and get an understanding of what the day-to-day risks for the retail outlets were, and also look at some of the incidents as they pertain to retail. So it's like really getting a good understanding of the retail risks and their retail account managers. And the account managers are really key. After that, I found out that they actually had specific retail newsletters I didn't know about. So they had their own little channels that could actually reach those staff that weren't really visible to corporate comms. So that would be one of my suggestions.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say, Blair, when you said retail and staff that aren't in front of a computer, I always say Alex the Park Ranger. I don't know Alex the Park Ranger. I've created Alex the Park Ranger, but I always try and keep that in mind when we create content and we reach out to them. I think it's important to, I find it more effective when we relate to their personal life. So Mel, I think you've mentioned it before when we've been chatting, but like work, play and study, or like, it's not just, cybersecurity is not just with work, it actually impacts their personal life. I think that's been quite effective when we've reached out to them and we say that, I understand, you don't use a computer for work all the time, but you do use this, like, for your online shopping and things like that. And that's been quite effective.
Yeah, I think that's great advice too. I think we've had a similar results where it's not just do it for me, but do it for yourself or the people that you care about. So
exactly.
We've had one question come in from Tom, is how many people should we have in each mob?
Well, meerkats have 30. I would probably say, I think each mob, I wouldn't go more than maybe 20, just because then, there's a lot of people to manage and feedback to collect. But Mel, what's your suggestion?
Yeah, I think it's relative to the size of the organisation. I think if you have, at least a couple for each department, that's great. So yeah, a couple of people that you can rely on in each department, I think would be good.
Just looking at the Slack, I've got another question from Kelly, is great session. How do you deal with areas that are opposed to change?
I always say, what do I always say? Oh, top down, bottom up, squash everyone in between. So I think you need top management, senior approved, like support, executive support, and also engage with our general staff, and everyone else kind of follows. But I think it's important to do it incrementally, like don't change everything overnight, really manage that change well, communicate it really well, communicate the benefits. Because obviously change is hard, but if you communicate the benefits well, I think, it's more acceptable. Staff are more willing to accept, okay, this is how we're changing things now, and it's for this benefit, as opposed to it's seen as a blocker.
No, excellent.
Yeah, I would agree. And looking at what's in it for me, so look, let's just say, for example, you're trying to improve a certain area. Look at the security benefits as security being an enabler. It's going to make life easier. So obviously you need to make sure you've got good policy and process that is streamlined, that does actually make people's life easier and not more cumbersome. But having that what's in it for me, starting off with that narrative, I think is really important. So getting people to sort of understand, how this process in the long run is going to make their life easier versus, we want you to do this, or we want you to do this different activity, or adopt this different policy. The narrative does need to be sort of spun around a little bit.
Awesome. Another question from Carl Ling is regarding your group of champions, do they face any challenges in terms of getting support from their respective areas?
Definitely, depending on the organisation, and I think it goes back to the maturity of the organisation, and unfortunately whether or not they've experienced a cyber incident. So never let an incident go to waste or event go to waste. If they've experienced it, you find that they are more receptive to change because they've experienced the impact of it. We struggle more with organisations that haven't, luckily, but it's not a case of if, it's a case of when it's going to happen. So we do find a bit more resistance. But I think, again, it just goes back to if you're able to identify your security champions and they can, take your content, and it doesn't have to be, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to have to be a slow process where it might just start off with one piece of material and then you build on top of that to get the senior support.
Yeah. there's lots of love for the comment around top down, bottom up, and squash everyone in between. A question that's just come through is, how do you find your champions?
Mel, do you want to?
Maybe an extension to that is also what makes a good one.
Yeah, do you want to touch on how you recruited your champions, and then I can just talk more generally about what makes a good one?
Yeah, sure. So in Victorian Government, I manage a community or practice of information security practitioners, we call them, and not everyone is interested in security awareness or cyber culture, but I've reached out to them, and there were a group that were interested in learning more and supporting me in that. So we've done, so that's how I kind of recruited the first mob. And then now through them, I'm able to identify more meerkats in their organization. And then that's how I've kind of recruited them. The only other thing I wanted to add is we've also got, it's got an innovation network page, sort of like our intranet, and it is across Victorian Government. So about 300,000 people hopefully can access it. And that's how I've been able to recruit more meerkats as well, because the content we produce, they've enjoyed it. I've had people reach out as well. And I think, Mel, you touched on it during the presentation, that people want to get into cyber as an industry. And that's how I've been able to identify these champions and help them, mentor them by becoming our champion, that they could potentially move into the industry.
Yeah, so this presentation did assume that there was already champions recruited, and we did anticipate the question of, well, how do you actually start and build a security awareness champions program to begin with and recruit? Expressions of interest, are putting an expression of interest across the organisation, identifying people that already supportive in different areas of the business. So they could be your sort of first sort of litmus test on whether they wanted to become a security champion or not. So EO, expressions of interest, is a good one. And as Daisy mentioned, that personal factor. I have in the past recruited for champions, and I've had people where they're not necessarily interested in the career change, but they want their children to be in security. So I have been then asked, oh, my child wants to be in security. I want to learn more about it so I can help my child. So I've had a few of those as well.
Excellent. Lots of interest here. A question from Carl is, are your champions volunteers?
Yes, they're volunteers, but I have told my boss, I don't know if he's on, but he's our whole of Vic CISO, that I want to maybe donate his time for our champions to maybe shadow him as a reward, because Victorian Government, we can't really give out rewards or prizes or anything like that. But I think there's other ways we can encourage and incentivize.
Yeah, excellent. I think that actually follows on. There was a question that came through on a similar topic: is do you give rewards to your champions? And I think that answers it. What about any other kind of incentives that may work? Not necessarily financial ones, but even like badging and hugs and things like that to kind of make people feel warm inside. Have you kind of had any reaction or response to anything like that?
We haven't done it in Vic Government yet, but I would like to have a bit of a logo badge where we can provide to our champions. I think, we're a badge of honor that you are our meerkat. I found my mascot. Thanks, Mel. Meerkat.
Yeah, I would agree. So in the past, I've seen like leaderboard or gamification or, things like, posting something on Yammer if they've highlighted a risk or an issue that really needs to be brought to the table. When it comes to trying to support people that maybe want to have more of a career in security, their vested interest is really around the fact that security is a growing industry. You can earn quite a good salary. There's lots of job opportunities. So looking at that from professional development perspective as well. I'm just seeing in the comments here, Trevor's mentioned that, offering them to be part of a UAT project launch. So, if their interest is in security, if they get involved in things like UAT testing, that can be rewarded for finding issues and things like that. And yeah, really about that sort of recognition of involvement as well. I haven't done one where there's been financial rewards as such, but more sort of maybe merchandise or more sort of like, movie tickets or things like that. Back in the days when you could go to a cinema, but yeah, maybe sort of some small scale gifts.